Good evening.
Beautiful.
Welcome to our program, 100 Perennials, No Garden Should Be Without. Today's presenter is George Papadakis, the owner of Telly's Nursery in Troy, Michigan. He is not new to our community as he has done several gardening programs over the last couple of years at CMPL. George, it's all yours now.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'll email you the handout following the presentation. Okay.
Okay.
It'll be I think I can pull it off. Okay, so these are some perennials. I think they're in order by sun and shade. So we're going to do sun at first in alphabetical order from A to Z, and then we're going to do some shade. I will, as we're going through the sun perennials, point out which ones will tolerate shade, because those should be added to the list of shade tolerant perennials. So as long as everybody can get an email from Uma, you don't need to write down anything. As you can see, there's a lot of information here. I mean, if you want to scribble down a few things that you feel you can't live without, then go ahead and do that. But it's all gonna, the handout is a Word document, and it's actually quite complete. So we're gonna start with, in alphabetical order, a plant called agastache or agastache. The common name for this is Anise hyssop. Sometimes it's called hummingbird mint. And one of the reasons why this is one of the perennials you can't live without is it blooms all summer long. There are very, very, very few perennials that bloom all summer long. This agastache called kudos coral, which comes in, these come in blue colors, they come in yellow, they come in orange, they come in purple, they come in nearly red color. Most of them are about 18 inches tall, but quite a few of them can grow up to 3 feet tall. They bloom all summer long. They're pretty readily available. Hummingbirds love them. They have fragrant foliage. They don't spread uncontrollably like a mint. And of course, I'm going to tell you what the bad thing is about them. The bad thing about them is that they can be short-lived. A severe winter can take them out. Poorly drained soil can take them out. Not having a very well-established root system, like planting them in September or October, can take them out. But if you have one established in the ground, they can be good for several years. And for the cost, and you get a lot of bang for your buck, because they do bloom all summer long. So these are for sun, all summer, all different colors, a few different heights, readily available, fragrant. Here it's pictured with some coneflower and some Coreopsis and some Sedum. So you can see how pretty that could be in the garden. I guess if somebody has a question, like there's a little dark leafed Sedum in the bottom of this, if they want to know a specific cultivar name, we can save it till the end. In some cases I know, in some cases I don't know. And this is just to show you some of the diversity of the genus. This is an agastache called Violet Vision. This is just one of the purple ones with sort of an extra heavy purpley blue flower, 18 inches tall. And then allium. The reason why I'm including allium is because some of us have deer problems, and this is a deer-proof plant. They're also very long-lived. In this picture, I'm showing you 3 really, really different plants. The first one, Millennium, blooms in the middle of the summer for about 5 or 6 weeks, and it's a clean blue-green mound of linear foliage that develops these, I'd say 2 to 3 inch lavender spheres on the top. So clean and tidy foliage, deer-proof, midsummer bloomer, very long-lived. You know how a lot of perennials sort of have a little bit of a weedy look, and you would never consider planting them in front of your house because they have a short bloom time or the foliage isn't pretty? This is the kind of plant that, even when it's not in bloom, it's tidy enough to be considered tolerable in front of your house because it's tidy looking. So that's a former perennial plant of the year called Millennium. That's the one on the left. Now, when a lot of us think of ornamental alliums or onions, they think of the two on the right. The top right one is called Schubertii. That's grown from bulbs that you can buy in the fall. The flower itself is about the size of a basketball. It's a really big firework-shaped flower on a plant that only grows about 15 to 18 inches tall. So it's a freaky looking thing. But it lasts forever, loves the sun, deer-proof, and that blooms right now, late May, early June, and that's it. Lower right-hand corner is Allium giganteum, which is the maybe the most common allium. It's also a bulb that you buy in the fall. They're like 3 for $10. We have them blooming outside in pots right now, but when they're blooming in the pots, they're expensive. The way to buy them is to acquire the bulbs in the fall, plant them and they come up for years and years and produce these softball-sized spheres of purple. Late May, early June, the flower will stay all summer long, but the color will fade. So a lot of people will go out there and spray paint theirs purple or blue or black or gold or silver, and then you could have these spheres lasting all through the summer on a perennial that the deer won't eat. So this could be a great plant for you for a midsummer, sun-loving, front of the house kind of a perennial border plant. Asters are here because they are very perennial. They're super hard to kill. A lot of us like mums, hardy mums, but don't like the fact that hardy mums sometimes aren't hardy. A lot of people will plant their hardy mums in the fall, like in September or October, and that doesn't give them enough time to establish a strong root system, and then they won't come up the following year. The time to plant a mum, if you can pull it off, is now. But can you find a hardy mum this time of year? No, not very easily. Fortunately, I mean, we offer them in the spring. We also offer them in the summer. But right about now, we take what's left from our spring crop and we combine it with our regular fall crop, and we pot them into big pots, and we'll sell them in the fall for like 3 or 4 times what we sell them for in the spring. For those people who forgot to grab them in the spring when they probably should have. So asters offer a much hardier alternative, and they come in blue, and you can't get a hardy mum in blue. This is also a front of the border plant, easy to grow. I guess the only one bad thing about these is after maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years, the plant should be divided to keep it vigorous and to keep all the foliage looking fresh. If you leave an aster alone for like 5 or 6 years, it starts to develop, we call it ugly legs, like where the bottom of the plant turns into like black, ugly stems, and all the flowers are on the top, and it's not as pretty of a plant. And that's, you can see it says will require division every few years. That's the one drawback. Okay, this is Baptisia. I love this plant because it's very long-lived. B, when it's done blooming, the foliage is still really attractive. It almost looks like a boxwood, and it's really pretty from spring till fall. And then C, it's a profuse bloomer, super easy, in all these different colors like blues and yellows, and even there's a pinkish one out there now, and purples. The one bad thing about this plant is that it does not bloom very long. We're talking 3 weeks or so, and that's about it. If any of you have this plant, you love it. Everybody who has one does. If you go to the garden center late May, early June, you see them blooming. That's when you'll buy them. And the rest of the time, these are totally ignored by people. But they're great, long-lived, late May, early June bloomers for sun. Buddleia, or butterfly bush. In the last few years, they have made these as small as 2 feet tall and as big as 6, in shades of yellow and blue and purple and pink and white. I don't know if I said yellow, but including yellow. Lately, they've come out with a lot of these short ones with really big fat flowers called pugsters. Let's see. See, look at all the different ones that are available. These are all different kinds of Buddleia. A lot of you are used to 4 to 5 foot tall growers in shades of blue, purple, and pink. This is the shortest one around right now. It's called Lo and Behold Blue Chip Junior. It only grows about 2 feet tall by 2 feet tall. There's another one, much larger flowers out there now called Pugster. The flowers are about 3 times the size of these. They're really big, like, well, here, I have a can of spray paint right here. The flowers are this big. And blue, you can get them in blue, you can get them in amethyst, you can get them in pink, and you can get them in white. But if I were you, I wouldn't buy any color except for Pugster Blue unless you can't get it. Pugster Blue is gorgeous. The other colors are just okay. They're a little faded. Pugster Blue is beautiful. And then this is just a super tiny one called Lo and Behold Pink Microchip. It's kind of cute, but the flowers are super small. And this is Lo and Behold Purple Haze, 2 to 3 feet tall, 3 to 4 feet wide. This one almost spreads like a ground cover. Now, maybe some of you have lost Buddleia over the years, and maybe you've lost roses over the years. In a really severe winter, things like Buddleia and roses can die. So as a precaution, we recommend that you throw a shovel full of soil over the crown of this plant in the fall, sometime between Thanksgiving and Christmas. The same thing that you would do with your roses that have a bud union or grafts Grafted roses should be protected in the winter by throwing a shovelful of soil over the crown. That's the same thing with this Buddleia, any of the Buddleia, just to play it safe. Now, what will happen is you'll plant your Buddleia, and year after year after year, everything will be wonderful, and you'll think, oh, I don't need to protect it. George doesn't know what he's talking about. But then you get this winter that comes along that takes away half of the Buddleia. You never know when it's going to happen. So just to play it safe, throw a shovelful of soil over the top. This is a Campanula. I am not a big fan of Campanula because many of them tend to be short-lived. Everybody buys the one called Campanula carpatica because it's got bigger blue flowers and it looks really pretty when you buy it in the store. But this one called Blue Waterfalls has a low sort of spreading habit. It starts blooming in June. It goes through July into August. And this will last for several years in the garden. If you drive around a neighborhood right now and you see all the phlox is done blooming, right? It's probably been done blooming for a week or two, but there are other low-growing, spreading splashes of blue in the landscape here and there. It's probably this plant. So unless you want an upright variety, this, in my opinion, is by far the best low-growing, spreading Campanula. It's called Blue Waterfalls, and it's a great plant. This is Caryopteris. This is also called Blue Mist Spirea. And like Buddleia, it's a late season bloomer. This doesn't even start blooming until September or October. Buddleia can start blooming as early as July, by the way. Caryopteris can have gray blue foliage, gray silver foliage. This is a very silver leaf variety. Usually they have powder blue foliage. There are other varieties out there with all gold foliage, variegated foliage. It's just a nice splash of blue on tidy looking foliage. And the blue comes when you don't have that many things blooming in August, September, and October. So take a look at that one. This is the gold version called Little Miss Sunshine. Pretty nice late blooming mound of gold, about 2 to 3 feet tall and 2 to 3 feet wide. Mums, we mentioned those with asters. When you can go out and buy a perennial for $4 or $5 or $6 or $7 that blooms for about a month and a half, that forms a mound 3 feet wide, I say you need this in the sun. Like I said, one bad thing about mums is people usually buy them in the fall and put them in the ground, or sometimes they don't even put them in the ground. They just leave them out on the patio or in a container. Well, those aren't going to overwinter. The only way to get a mum to overwinter usually is to put them in the ground. And the sooner you put them in the ground, the more likely that they are to establish a strong root system, and therefore the more likely they are to overwinter. So if you're one of those people that puts a mum out on the patio and enjoys it until it's done blooming and then plants it in the yard. What's that? Oh, okay. I heard somebody. If you put it in the ground soon enough and it establishes a strong root system, it'll come back next year. Clematis, as far as climbing plants go, I would argue that this is by far the most floriferous, the most vibrant, the most diverse. You can get these blooming in May, in June, in July, in August, and September. Tea flowers, enormous flowers, any color you want. Maybe some of you have had issues with this thing called Clematis wilt. The hybrids, like what I'm showing you on the screen right now, can get that. And this one can get that. But then there are others, the species types of Clematis. Usually they have smaller flowers and they bloom at all different times. Some are more bushy, some are very vigorous, some are sort of your traditional climbing plants. These don't get Clematis wilt. So if you've killed Clematis before, you may want to consider switching to a species that doesn't get this disease that Clematis get. The disease comes when there's just like a little nick in a leaf. There's this pathogen that enters the plant and takes out the stem, and there's not a heck of a lot you can do about it. So you just hope that there's enough of the plant left that you still have some Clematis after that happens, or you switch to these that don't get the disease. Coreopsis, very, very diverse group of plants. The great thing about them is most of these bloom all summer long, all different colors, all different sizes. The bad thing about them is some varieties tend to be more short-lived than others. The threadleaf types tend to last for quite a while, and then the lancifolia types or lanceolata or grandiflora types have wider leaves and tend to be more short-lived. But for blooms all summer long, even if you're going to lose a few of them, after a few years, this is a great plant, very diverse for full sun. This is just a close-up of one called Pink Sapphire that's sort of unique. Most of us think of Coreopsis as being yellow-leafed, yellow flowering plants or gold flowering plants. Some are pink. This is a dianthus called Cahori. And although like other dianthus, it does tend to be short-lived. Like you only get a few years out of these in the garden. They do, especially this one, bloom all summer long. Now there's a Cahori Scarlet and there's a Cahori Pink and a few other Cahoris. They all look about the same like what you see here. They do bloom from the minute you plant them in May till they're frozen solid in October. Not very many perennials can do that, but you are taking the risk that, especially if it's a severe winter or you don't have very well drained soil, this plant could die going through the winter. Coneflower, all different colors, all different sizes. They flower great July and August. Some bloom a little bit earlier, like in June. Some bloom a little bit later, like into September. But they're typically long-lived plants in a big, huge range of colors. Cheyenne Spirit's a nice one because it's grown from seed, and unlike a lot of these really fancy ones, like some of these, it's far less expensive. And you can see you get all these really vibrant colors from them. So here's some of the really fun ones. You pay a little bit more from these, but you can get all sorts of different flower forms and colors. These ones that are sort of petalless, these ones that have sort of the spoon-shaped petals, super, super diverse genus, all different colors and sizes and shapes to choose from. These are all different fun ones. Okay, perennial geranium. This plant is quite tolerant of shade, so you can include this in your list of plants that you can sneak into a little bit more shade. This, like many of the other plants that we've discussed already, will bloom all summer long, starting in June, going through until September and even October. The one bad thing about this is that it only comes in this color. I don't care what anybody tells you. If they sell you another geranium, it's not going to bloom as long as this one does. This is the only one that you can take that will bloom all summer long. The good thing about it is, unlike a lot of the other long blooming perennials that we've already discussed, this one is long lived. I'm seeing landscapers use this in the landscape like they used to use daylilies. We're all getting kind of sick of daylilies, so it's kind of nice when you can put something else in their place with a longer bloom time that gives you a different look and a different color and a different leaf shape. So Geranium Rozanne is a former perennial plant of the year that, boy, if I had a top 10 list, this would be on it. And here's your daylilies. A lot of different heights, a lot of different colors. They do have linear foliage, which can be useful when contrasted with broader or finer foliage, so that's kind of a good thing. My big beef with daylilies is that by September, the foliage is looking pretty darn rough. And it's such a strong plant that even if you cut back the foliage, it'll come back year after year after year. They do bloom for several weeks, middle of the summer. Deer do like them. They are edible, by the way. Even we could eat them, but trust me, they don't taste all that good. So really pretty flowers, super hardy. You do have to deal with the fact that the foliage late in the season is not attractive. Hibiscus, perennial hibiscus. The last few years, there has been some breeding efforts that have produced plants with much larger flowers with overlapping petals. They bloom for a long time. The flowers last longer. Some have really dark, rich, glossy, chocolate brown, or nearly black foliage. They come in shades of red and white and pink. We have all different kinds, all different ones to choose from. They flower really strong July and August. They'll tolerate quite a bit of shade. They tolerate wet and even heavy clay soils. Great plants. Let's see if I have any. Nope. It's the only one I have a picture of. That's a shame because, boy, there's some really, really pretty ones out there. Now, if you go to the garden center, they're just starting to look like something. It's very late to emerge out of the pot in the spring when all the other perennials are starting to look like something. And, you know, later on in May and June, these still don't look like much. But by July, they're 3 to 4 feet tall and blooming. So these are wonderful plants. Not to be confused with the tropical hibiscus, which you have to bring inside for the winter. Iris. I am not a big fan of iris, but I do like this iris because even when it's done blooming, you have this super vibrant golden green linear leafed mound of foliage. You've got these blue flowers in late May, early June, great for a few minutes while they're blooming, just like any other iris. But unlike regular iris, when they're done blooming, you have this super vibrant linear foliage, which looks great up against bold foliage, fine foliage, low foliage, anything that could contrast with upright linear golden green foliage. So I would use this iris and Siberian iris before our regular German iris any day. Speaking of Siberian iris, this is another plant that, yes, it does have really pretty purple flowers for a few minutes in late May and early June, and the rest of the time, you've got this beautiful, linear, upright, bright green foliage, grows in sun or quite a bit of shade. Just the leaf itself, I think, is worth having this plant in the garden because it's easy. Long-lived, takes some shade as well as full sun, plus you have the bonus of those purpley flowers. Lavender, like a few of the plants that we've already discussed, lavender do not last forever. They're good in the landscape for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Usually if somebody plants 10 or 20 of these, 1 or 2 will die the first year. 1 or 2 will die the next year. To ensure longevity, it helps if you have really well-drained soil. They're really good summer bloomers. Every plant will go 2 to 3 feet tall and 2 to 3 feet wide. Fragrant foliage, excellent cut flower. It's an herb. So a very, very popular plant for us, but it is a little disappointing when you plant 6 and only 5 come back the next year. Phenomenal is a new variety that's a little less hardy than some of the other varieties, but it's a really strong bloomer, forms a really nice, clean, round mound, and it's a really good cut flower. I know one of the, we supply lavender to a lot of the lavender growers in northern Ohio and in Michigan, and this is one of their favorites. Shasta daisies, good old, she loves me not kind of flowers. I think these are great because they bloom for quite a while their first time around. You cut them back and they can rebloom later in the season. The bad thing about them is that if you don't divide these frequently, after a while they'll sort of get kind of splotchy in the garden. So dividing your clump of leucanthemum or Shasta daisies every 3 to 5 years keeps it vigorous. This is a gold hinted one called Broadway Lights. You guys are all, I'm sure, familiar with the white ones that can be short or tall. This is a gold one. Here's a few sort of goofy ones with like layers of petals or double flowers. This is Liatris. The common name for this is Kansas Gayfeather. We do a lot of the flowers for a mall called the Village of Rochester. And there are some little island plantings where we plant a few perennials year after year after year. And some have been there for years and have taken no maintenance whatsoever. Daylilies, hostas, there's some asters, salvia, and Liatris, this plant right here. If you plant this in the garden, you can leave it alone for years, and it's like a peony. Years and years and years and years, and it requires no maintenance whatsoever. The plants shoot up to be about 2.5 to 3 feet tall. They come in this lavender purple color. They also come in white. It is a native plant, so it tolerates a wide range of soils. This is a very bulletproof plant for sun. Lilies come in all different colors, all different sizes. Many of the orientals and the ones that are bred with orientals have fragrance. I think it's pretty hard to live without these in the landscape, but they do have one very fatal flaw, and that is that if there's deer, they will eat these. And that can really be frustrating, especially if they come along before they've bloomed. So I love lilies, not to be confused with daylilies, especially for their fragrance and their diversity. But if you've got deer, you've got to protect them. This is bee balm. In contrast to the lilies, this is a pretty good deer-proof plant. Like other plants whose foliage is pungent or scented, deer just don't eat them. So a lot of you are familiar with the red one, like what you see on the left, and there's a lot of purples and lavenders and lilacs and pinks that are tall. Lately, they've been developing a lot of shorter varieties. These are really good, solid bloomers from early July to late July. They can last for years in the garden. If you have really good soil, they can spread pretty strong. which is an argument for dividing them more frequently. Now more than ever, we're offering mildew-resistant varieties, so they're less likely to get that discolored foliage as the season progresses. And just so you know, by the time the mildew gets bad on these, they're usually done blooming anyway, and you could cut the foliage back and the plant will be perfectly fine. They're that tough. Nepeta, these are still blooming pretty good right now. The common name for this is cat mint, not to be confused with mint, not to be confused with catnip. You get a strong flush, and it's a pretty diverse genus that includes some really compact varieties that are only 12 to 15 inches tall, and other taller varieties that might grow to 2.5 feet tall. The way these work is they bloom now, early in the season, late May, early June, for a good month or so, and they're super tough. They're really pretty when they're blooming. When they're done blooming, like the image on the right, the flower fades, and what you're supposed to do is shear it, and it'll rebloom again for you later on in July or early August. And after it blooms again, you can go through and shear it a second time to get a third bloom later on in the fall. Now that's the only variety that we're showing here, but there are a lot of different ones out there. It's such a tough, long blooming, good colored plant that it's hard to have a perennial border without some kind of cat mint or nepeta. It does not spread uncontrollably like mint. And your cat, it won't be as wild about this as they would be catnip, but your cat might like it. This is a peony. I like peonies because they last forever. There are a lot of colors, especially if you get into some of the tree peonies or Ito peonies. The bad thing about them is that they do not bloom for very long. You have this beautiful bouquet of flowers for just a couple, 3 weeks, and then you're stuck with just a decent looking foliage plant. Because they're so long-lived, I would consider using these in the landscape, especially if you have sun. This is a close-up of a yellow Ito peony called Bartzella. These come in all different colors. This is Cora Louise, Julia Rose. There's some pretty lilac ones. These are Ito peonies. They're a little bit more expensive, but they are more tolerant of shade, and they do come in a much broader range of colors than your regular herbaceous peonies. Moving on to the peas now, more peas. This is Perovskia or Russian sage. Former perennial plant of the year, forms a silver-leafed mound that develops blue flowers most of the summer, July to September. They're usually very long-lived, loves heat and sun and dry and drought. We do have smaller ones out there now, well adapted for a larger border because they are pretty big plants, almost like a Buddleia typically will grow big, or a hibiscus will grow big at that kind of a plant. Ornamental grasses, I'm only going to show you a few because it's a very diverse group of plants. And one of my favorites actually isn't this one anymore. Now it's one called Redhead, which looks a lot like this one, except the flower has a much stronger hint of red in it. So it's a cattail-like flower on a round plant that grows about 4 feet tall. The one I like is called Redhead. It develops a flower in August that lasts through September. The flowers stay through the winter, but they start to shatter as the winter goes on. They do provide winter interest. It's just a big, beautiful mound of gorgeous foliage, accented by flowers late in the summer. Upright phlox. A lot of these get powdery mildew, but we've got more and more and more varieties that don't. And we have a lot of varieties that will start blooming earlier now. Some of these have already started blooming and will keep blooming through the rest of June, through July, into August, and even early September. The one that I'm showing on the screen is sort of fun because it has the pretty flowers that you're used to on a phlox, but the one on the right also has variegated foliage. So even when it's not in bloom, you have this bright gold and green mound of foliage that you can enjoy in May when they're not blooming, and June mostly when they're not blooming, and even into the fall. And note that it says David and quite a few others have exceptional mildew resistance. David is a pure white upright garden phlox. Platycodon or balloon flower. This is a blue or pink or white ball-shaped bud that cracks open to these blue bell-shaped flowers. Some of these can be the size of a basketball when they're mature, and some of them can be the size of a 2.5 to 3 feet tall, depending on which variety you select. They're long blooming, they're long lived, good color, blue to add into the landscape. So these are pretty fun plants. Rudbeckia or black-eyed Susan?
George,
Yes,
I have a question. Somebody asked this question. What would you say would be your top 10 for sun, front, landscaping, low maintenance?
I think it'd be pretty hard. Well, you know what? How about if I go through that when we get to the end of the alphabet here in just a second?
Okay, thank you, George.
I'll go through them. I'll go through them really fast.
Okay, thank you, no problem.
Okay, now I would not consider Rudbeckia one of my top 10 plants because they spread fast, and B, some of these are prone to a disease. The regular gold sturm that's sold all over the country, that millions have been planted all over the place, gets this disease. It causes the foliage to grow sort of black. Not so much in the spring, but definitely in the summer and the fall. Well, now we've got a variety out there called American Gold Rush that looks just like this, and it's easy, and it spreads nice, and it's vibrant, and it's long-lived, and it does not get the disease. So I wouldn't do Gold Sturm, which is the one in the image here, unless you had to. I would try to get American Gold Rush if you can. This is Salvia May Night. These are also blooming right now. This is probably one of my top 10 plants because it does bloom for so long, and it does cover over so nicely with flowers. You can get these in pink and white, but most people buy blue. You see these on the side of the highway because when they're looking for a plant that's going to last for a while and have a long, long season of interest, this is a good plant that they can use. Perennial salvia. Mixed in this picture are a few sort of fun things, but the black lacy leafed plant is Sambucus or elderberry. They come in gold as well. And in fact, that might be the next image. We'll see here in just a second. But this black one does everything that a Japanese maple does, except that it's not that nice red color. It's this sort of lacy black color. Plants can be pruned to maintain their size, and if they're not pruned, they can grow all the way up to like 6 or 7 feet. They tolerate sun. They tolerate quite a bit of shade. They're fast growing, really nice texture, light pink flowers followed by berries that are edible, but the birds usually eat them. And this is the same as elderberry, but it's an ornamental elderberry. And this is the gold version called lemon lace. It doesn't get as big as black lace. As you can see, super vibrant gold foliage. This is about a 3 to 4 by a 3 to 4 foot wide, 3 to 4 foot tall mound of foliage. Sedum, probably in my top 10 because they're long-lived, they require no maintenance, pretty good-looking foliage, very diverse in terms of height and color both. And every plant that I have shown you, none of them, other than the ornamental grass, provides you with winter interest. Sedum, if you take this picture and change everything to different shades of tan, this provides winter interest. It leaves a skeleton of tan foliage through the winter, and it still looks pretty good through the winter. Everything else other than the ornamental grasses leaves hardly anything through the winter and does not provide winter interest. So in a perennial border, in the winter, you don't have very much to look at unless you've worked in a boulder, a bird bath, some kind of art, an ornamental grass, I don't know, a bird feeder, something. So that's where plants like grasses and sedum, like this one shown here, can be very valuable. There are low-growing sedum with attractive foliage. This is sort of a fun one called Marina. Vera Jameson is even lower with pinkish flowers above purple foliage. And then this is a lamb's ear, not a sedum. Silver foliage, never blooming if you buy the right varieties, just a nice, clean, tidy mound of silver. Looks really good with purple, looks good with roses, looks good with blue, looks pretty good with pink, looks really good with white. Just a low mound of silver leaves that sort of resemble the ear of a lamb, and that's how it got the name lamb's ears. This is Veronica Royal Candles. These are going to be looking really good in the next week or two. It kind of looks like a perennial salvia that we talked about a minute ago, except even longer blooming. They also come in shades of blue, pink, and white. They're generally taller. I'm not sure why these aren't as popular as salvia, other than maybe they lose their shape a little bit over time. But you could you could help with that just by pruning it. So it's an alternative to the perennial salvia, same colors, slightly larger growth habit, and an even longer blooming time. All kinds of Veronica are out there. So let me screen through these perennials for sun, and I will tell you which ones I guess if you want to know which ones are my top 10, I probably won't count 10, but I'll come pretty close. Let's see here. Okay, I would say not this one because they tend to be short-lived. I love this allium, Millennium. I would throw that into my top 10. I think it'd be pretty hard to not have a gorgeous perennial garden without a Buddleia in it, especially Pugster Blue. I think it's pretty hard to get by without a mum because you've got so many colors from which to choose. I mean, this is by far the best blooming perennial vine. Coreopsis, you can't do without these. They're just too long blooming and too diverse. Dianthus cahori, it's worth the fact that it might not overwinter because it blooms for so long. Coneflower, can't live without that. All these different ones. Perennial geranium, definitely in top 10. Long blooming, super long lived, easy to grow in sun or partial sun. I don't think I would include daylilies. I love this plant. I had one in my garden, and the flowers are great, but the foliage is way better. So this is a variegated iris. Shasta daisies, boy, that's a beautiful plant, and you get a lot of bang for your buck. Liatris is a great plant, super long lived. Lilies, I worry about the deer. Bee balm, maybe not a long enough season of bloom. Nepeta, definitely top 10 because they do bloom for such a long time and they're super low maintenance. If I was going to buy a peony, I would spend the money on an Ito. We take all major credit cards. These are about $50 plants, but boy, are they worth it. And this is, I could show you some gorgeous Itos, not just those. Perovskite might get too big for most of us. You can't have a garden without an ornamental grass of some sort. We have many from which to choose. Rudbeckia, like I said, I would only buy American Gold Rush. Salvia is definitely top 10. Sedum is top 10. Lamb's ear, boy, that's a tough one. I had one for years. I never had to do anything. I loved it. The basketball never seemed to be able to kill it. It just came back year after year. Veronica's pretty darn good. So there's some of my top 10 or 15. Now we'll go into some shade. You're going to be surprised how many great plants we have available for shade that have gorgeous flowers. This is a shade-tolerant delphinium-like plant that blooms late in the season. Unlike delphiniums, it is long-lived. Unlike delphiniums, deer don't eat it. Unlike delphiniums, it doesn't come in 500 different shapes and sizes and colors. There's only a few different ones out there from which to choose, but it is a beautiful blue spike that you can use in the shade, and it does bloom late, and it is long-lived. I love the foliage of this plant. This is Simicifuga or Actea, hillside black beauty, but there's a whole bunch of other ones out there. Lacy black foliage, beautiful up against golden things, up against green things, up against blue things, and a super fragrant white flower late in the summer or fall whose fragrance you'll never forget. This is Alchemilla, as let's see, you call that a chartreuse gray-green leaf topped by these beautiful yellow flowers. I took this picture in England in 2000 in early July. For us, it looks like this mostly in June. The one bad thing about these is later on in the summer, especially when it's hot, the foliage can get kind of rough looking. And at that time, kind of like a silver mound, you can shear it and it'll grow back beautiful foliage followed by these nice chartreuse flowers. The water beads on these leaves and looks like diamonds, and that's how it got the name Lady's Mantle. Lady's Mantle is like a piece of jewelry that ladies wore on their necklace that was often made of diamonds that shimmered just like water on the leaf of an alchemilla. There's just a close-up of one. Anemone is a fall blooming plant, but now we've got some that start blooming in the summer. Varieties like Wild Swan. But usually you see pinks and whites that are anywhere as short as 12 to 15 inches tall and as tall as 3 feet. They're long-lived, easy to grow in shade or sun. They can spread if you have really good foliage, but they're pretty easy to control if you don't let them get out of hand. Just gorgeous glowing mounds of color late in the season. This is a good example of one of the dwarf varieties. The Pretty Lady series includes 3 or 4 colors. all different shades of pink that are compact at 14 to 16 inches. This is the one that I said starts blooming early. This is blooming right now out on the bench 20 feet away from me. Beautiful shade of white, and look at the back of the flower, how it's got that purple on it. This starts blooming now and goes all the way into the frost like September, October. This is a beautiful mound of golden foliage. This is the common name is spikenard, but nobody calls it that. Aurelia Sun King has beautiful golden foliage glowing in shade or partial shade, deer proof. Just a beautiful mound of golden foliage in the shade. Put that up against a blue hosta or a green fern, and you've got a nice combination. This is a stilbe, just to show you the diversity of the genus. This one, Mighty Quinn Red, and there's another one out there called Mighty Pip, I think it's called, grows 4 feet tall. Others are much shorter. These are really good midsummer bloomers. They do need to be kept moist. They like to be fed. All sorts of different colors. Japanese painted fern is just one of many, many, many kinds of fern that you can use for their spectacular foliage. Contrast these with the right grasses and the right hostas, and you'll have a wonderful combination from spring till they're frozen dead in the fall, even without flowers. Plumbago is a very underused plant because they bloom late in the season when people don't usually go to the garden center, but it does have a fluorescent blue flower. You can see these russety tones in the buds. Those spread all over the plant as the temperatures drop in the fall, so it takes on these really pretty orangey, burnt red hues. It's a ground cover. It's one of the few low-growing perennials that blooms in the fall. Most of your fall bloomers tend to be quite tall. This is a fall bloomer that's quite short. Plumbago. This is a Brunera, one of many, many varieties. This one's called Alexander's Great. They are beautiful silver leaf plants for shade or partial shade. They will not tolerate very much midday sun. The one thing about these, and they have beautiful blue flowers in the spring. The one bad thing about these that you should note is they will not tolerate dry soil. So if you're one of those people that has a pine tree or a maple and the foliage below it, or I mean the soil below it is bone dry, this will not tolerate that. This needs to go somewhere where you've got moist soil or a good sprinkler system. Dicentra, the one on the right is the old-fashioned kind. It happens to be the golden leaf one called Golden Heart. Comes up early in the spring. Beautiful heart-shaped flowers that look like they're, dripping white blood, sort of. Beautiful golden foliage. The others have green foliage. Some come with white flowers. The one bad thing about these is they come up, they're gorgeous for about a month or two, and then the foliage starts to disintegrate and they don't look so good. So you plant this behind a fern, behind a hosta. Pretty hard to live without that. And then the one on the left is the ever-blooming kind of Dicentra. This needs to be planted in good soil. Blooms the strongest in June and July, but then it still blooms August and September, just a little bit less. Comes in pinks and rose, a little bit of white, but those are pretty hard to find. Oh, here's just a shot of the old-fashioned bleeding heart, the traditional one with the green leaves. Ferns, this is an autumn fern. The nice thing about this one is that the foliage gets a really nice orangey color late in the season, and it's evergreen. This looks like this in the winter as well as the summer, so you have multiple seasons of interest. It's not just a summer performer. Of course, it loves the shade. Did I miss something? Oh, I almost forgot my favorite. This is my very favorite ornamental grass for shade. It's called Hackanacoa macro aureola. Has gold and green striped foliage and this beautiful waterfall growth habit. You contrast this with a fern or a hosta, spectacular from spring till fall. You absolutely cannot have a shade garden without this plant, period. The only bad thing about it is it won't take a full day of sun, but we can live without that, especially if we have some shade. And two, it is a little bit on the slow side to get established, but you give it a year or two in the garden, it'll be one of your favorite plants for sure. Heuchera, very diverse genus. Once again, gorgeous foliage from spring till fall, just like this grass. Imagine putting this grass up against that leaf, up against a green fern, up against a golden hosta. Then you've got combinations that are perfect from spring till fall. All different colors from which to choose. You've got your blacks and your ambers and your golds, and it just goes on and on and on. Beautiful foliage plants for shade or partial shade. Some are heavy bloomers like Blondie, like this one you see here. This one's kind of fun called Circus. Coco's one of the miniatures with black foliage, and it just goes on and on and on. These are pretty priceless in the shade. All right, and you can see there's a lot from which to choose. Oh, isn't it? Look at that. That's gorgeous. Okay, here's another plant no one should be able to live without. This is a hellebore. It's the earliest blooming herbaceous perennial on the planet. You have these spectacular flowers that are single or multi-petaled in shades of white and pink and yellow and black and red. Some flowers face more down, some face more out. Beautiful blue-green foliage. They last forever. Look at that flower. I mean, oh yeah. I can't imagine a garden without these. Look
wow,
at
that's great, George. I really like it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Everybody, we have these for $9.99 right now. They'll be blooming and they'll change your life next year.
Okay, I'll come tomorrow to get it.
Okay, I got there's probably only about 10 more. Let's see what we got here. Hostas. You can go out and buy boring hostas or you can buy fun hostas. I encourage you to buy fun hostas whose foliage is striking spring till fall. There are a lot of them that are boring, but there are some really fun ones out there too. So take advantage of the fun ones, get rid of the boring ones, contrast them with some of the other foliage that we've already discussed, and you'll have a spectacular display in the shade from spring till fall. That's just a goofy one called Electrocution. Island Breeze is just really vibrant. Lamium is a nice silvery foil. And if you keep this plant tidy, I like it. When it gets kind of messy and spread out all over the place, I'm not a big fan, but the silver is really nice. It does have pink or white flowers early in the summer. It's a very popular plant for shade. Once again, contrast this foliage with something else and you'll have a nice combination. Same with this plant here. This is a Ligularia called Britt Marie Crawford, yellow daisy-like flowers in July above shiny purple foliage. Beautiful mound of foliage. I would grow this even if it didn't flower, but of course it does. Lobelia comes in all different colors. Hummingbirds love it, tolerates wet soil, great in shade or quite a bit of sun. The one bad thing about it is they do tend to be short-lived. Now up along the rivers up north, it comes back year after year after year, but it's reseeding itself. This is Golden Creeping Jenny. For a really nice splash of gold, you can use this anywhere. Maybe just keep it from spreading uncontrollably because too much is not a good thing. But gold is beautiful with some of the foliage that we've discussed, including hostas and corabels and ornamental grasses and the Ligularia and so on and so on. Primula, there's a lot of fun ones out there, including these double ones like the Ballerina Valentine. And oh, that's the only one I have to show you. But these come in shades of yellow, shades of orange, shades of pink. They bloom early in the season, and then it's just a mound of foliage. And they do come back year after year after year. This is Thalicum rocabruneanum, or meadow rue, grows about 5 or 6 feet tall with small lavender flowers. I thought I had a close-up of the flower, but it's like a big, tall lavender baby's breath. I use this to cover my air conditioner in a shady corner at my old house. Lasted for years and years and years. Love the plant. We've got one in the display garden right now that's still blooming pretty nice. They do come shorter in shades of white or pink. Great. I mean, you can see, look at all the great plants we have for shade. In this, and then I put this in to encourage you to consider, if you're having trouble keeping color in your shady perennial garden, why not throw in a splash of pink from something like what you see here? This happens to be a pink begonia. Or maybe you could throw in some yellow impatiens or some red New Guinea impatiens or some pink polka dot plant or some gorgeous coleus. There's no reason why you can't. I mean, I wouldn't put mixed impatiens in front of my shady perennial border, but if I wanted to add a little splash of color, I would consider a nice magenta one here or there, or an orange one here or there, or just something to add a little bit of color. For literally pennies, you could add quite a bit of color from spring till fall in the shady perennial border, and boy, you could do the same thing in the sunny perennial border too. And in here, this is a nice mixed border late in the season. Maybe a lot of us don't have this much color and diversity in October, but you could have that if you pick the right plants. And those are asters mostly in the center of the picture. And on the right, of course, is my favorite grass, Hackana macra aureola. This is one of my customers' homes over on Lake Angeles. Okay, and that's it. All right, I am going to close this, and I can field questions for a moment or two.
Okay, thank you very much, George. That was a wonderful presentation. And I have only one question here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
That's the one what I just, okay, one question that was, what would you say would be your top 10 for sun, front landscaping, low maintenance?
When you say front, do you mean in front of the front of your house?
I have
the front of your house or the front of the border?
Let me. Okay, I think yes, front of the house.
Yes, the front of the house.
Okay,
right,
I'll tell you why that is a really good question, because everybody comes in and they want a perennial they can put in a pot that blooms all summer long and will come back year after year after year. Well, that doesn't exist. There's nothing like that. Now, can we put a perennial in front of the house that blooms for a really long time and comes back year after year after year? Yes, we can. However, we need to take into consideration how weedy it looks while it's blooming and when it's done blooming. So I would definitely consider perennial salvia. I would definitely consider nepeta or catmint. I would definitely consider creeping phlox, even though we didn't discuss it, because for a few weeks in May, when there's not that many things holding down the fort in front of your house that's full of perennials, creeping phlox is a beautiful, beautiful plant.
Beautiful.
And when it's done blooming, you can shear it and tidy it up a little bit. And by then, you've got all these other plants that are blooming and filling in. I think I would consider using sedum for sure, because you got all that diverse, tidy foliage. I don't know if I mentioned the Allium millennium yet. I think I would consider Coreopsis. I think I would consider Veronica. I would probably drop in a lamb's ear. If you've got a little bit of shade somewhere, I would definitely consider Corabells, any of the shade-tolerant grasses like the Echinacea, hostas, and ferns. Those are all really tidy and would be beautiful in the front of the border. Back to sun, I would definitely put an ornamental grass in a few different places in the front of the house. It's especially popular for softening the corners of your house or your garage. Peonies, if you've got other things to carry you beyond May, I think are tidy enough to put in front of the house. The perennial Geranium Rozanne, I think I would put in front of the house because it blooms for so long. And I think even a daylily has its place in front of the house.
George, I just want to tell you, you can stop sharing your screen, then we can see you fully. Like if you stop, stop sharing. Now presentation is over. Now we can have, then that's good.
Okay.
Okay.
So you've got I guess I can repeat them really quickly for those of you who are writing them down. In the sun, I think phlox would be good in front of the house. Phlox. The Allium millennium, perennial salvia, sedum, some of the ornamental grasses. I think I would look at daylilies. I think you have to look at Coreopsis. I might have mentioned catmint, probably Veronica. If I was going to put any iris, I would use a Siberian or a variegated iris that I mentioned. I think I would use a dianthus, knowing that, hey, maybe I have to replace it every few years. Peonies could probably squeeze in there. And there's about 12 right there that I think we should be thinking about. In the shade, in front of the house, corabells, hostas, grasses, ferns for sure. Corabells, I said. Probably plumbago would be tidy enough. I know ligularia would be tidy enough. And I know I'm forgetting something really important.
So I have a question about Siberian Iris. I had some and they were beautiful. I mean, they're spectacular flower, but maybe because I had maybe an old variety, after a while, then the foliage just fell over and was not attractive. Are the newer varieties better?
It's one of two things that's causing your problem. A, it hasn't been divided for a long time. which isn't that big of a deal. Not dividing won't kill it, but dividing it more frequently will give you that strong upright growth habit. And the second thing is, although it is a plant that's quite tolerant of shade, if you've got it in too much shade and you don't divide it, now you've got a recipe for a plant that's probably going to flop. So you've got to either move it into more sun, divide it more frequently, and then the last thing that you can do is to reduce how much nitrogen it's getting. Like, don't feed it, because high nitrogen will make it grow up fast and be sort of soft, and then it flops over in the garden.
Okay.
So those are your options for a Siberian Iris.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw on the cover of one of the old perennial books, it was just a picture of a Siberian Iris next to a big bold leafed hosta. Two really pretty foliage plants with just a few flowers, and it was pretty enough to go on the cover of the book. So when you've got foliage like that, you're off to a really good start.
Right.
If you've ever toured any of the gardens in England, they will look at the foliage before they even look at the flower.
Right.
Because the flowers come and go, but the foliage is there all the time.
Right.
I would argue if you went to England and tried to find a daylily, you'd have a hard time, because they can't tolerate the way the foliage looks later on in the summer. So
thank you.
Yeah,
thank you very much, George. Thank you very much, George. And this is a wonderful presentation and very informative. And thank you all for attending this program.
It was inspiring.
We can grow beautiful perennials in our garden now, I think. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, I will send the handout to you, and it matches up with the presentation pretty good. And you can come into the store and look for some of those varieties.
Sure.
We're open 9 to 7, Troy location and Shelby location, whenever you guys are ready, okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Stay safe, George.
Okay.
Stay safe.
Okay, see you guys later.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for your patience, too.
Thank you.